Good evening, everyone. We're live on Bharat Voice. I'm Ritika Acharya, and today we are going to talk about the development story, the India way. And to talk to us about this, we have with us the very popular BJP leader, Karuna Gopal ji, and she's also the president of the Foundation for Futuristic Cities. Karuna ji, welcome to Bharat Voice.
Thank you, Ritika. Thank you for inviting me for this show.
Yeah, I know you've been very busy last few days in party work and stuff like that, and we've been going back and forth. But thank you so much finally taking out time and talking to us.
My pleasure.
Karna ji, I'll straight away move on to the question which is often talked about by everybody, and it's often questioned. The skeptics and the intellectuals will say that India's growth rate is slow and the GDP is going down. There are a lot of problems. What do you have to say about it? What is your answer to those skeptics?
See, I personally think that these people who criticize India's growth story are people who either hate India or these are the people who have no clue about a development cycle. So typically, let me just explain, I don't have to explain the first part. If you don't like India, then whatever happens to India, you seem to take, a negative view and try to be critical about it. But the other side is, if you don't understand the growth story, typically there's a growth cycle. And how does that happen? If you introduce big ticket reforms in a country as large and as complex as India, if you introduce big ticket reforms like a GST or a RERA that has been introduced into the real estate, there's bound to be disturbance. There's bound to be a bit of dip in performance. And this is something that these people don't seem to understand. Now, for instance, you need to give time for adaptation.
Yes.
You need time. Whenever you bring in reforms, you need to give a lot of time for adaptation. And it's just not going to happen overnight. Now, I'll give you an example. Like about 15 years ago, we were implementing technology in municipal corporations and also in water utilities. The minute we do technology, why do we introduce technology? We do it because we want to bring in efficiencies, right? So it's actually a good thing. But the minute we introduce technology, there was a dip in performance. Suddenly, the staff never understood what's happening, and they took a whole lot of time to adapt to the new, scenario. So there's actually a dip in performance. And Ritika, if you really watch, school students or education system, you try and introduce a new curriculum or new way of teaching. So the minute new way of teaching is introduced, a very smart performer performs. His performance is not as high because the bloke is learning. I'll give an example. I've seen in healthcare. If you give carrot juice, you agree carrot juice is good? If you give carrot juice to a person who's addicted to junk food, like he's been living on pizzas and burgers, he's going to want it the first time around. He's actually going to get worse. So this is what is happening to India. Before it gets better, it has to get a little worse. And anyone with a bit of knowledge and understanding about the development cycle will not crib about this. And another you may laugh when I say this. When I sit down and think about, what typically India is going through, when Prime Minister Modi came to introduce these real big reforms, India has never been used to all this. India has been governed in a very unruly way. People were not used to systems, processes, and maybe they were also lazy. So you take such a bunch of people, try to correct the whole scenario. It's like putting them in a correctional facility. Take the entire country, put it in a facility, then you find withdrawal, right? I mean, people protest. There's withdrawal symptoms, and that's exactly what is happening, I think. So obviously, people, when they criticize, they don't either like India or they don't understand how growth takes place. There's going to be a dip when you introduce reforms, and that's what is happening in India.
So, since you're talking about the big ticket reforms, I'll come to the question that what, according to you specifically, are the, let's say, top two or top three reforms that are going to, or which have been taken in the last 6 years, which will have a lasting impact on not just India, but will also have a lasting impact on the world. And I say world because when India will progress, the world will also see a change.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, are you okay with a longer version of
Sure,
what I think?
please. There are
Okay.
people already watching us live already. There are 10 people watching us live, so please.
Absolutely. So, Ritika, first of all, I'm not into giving any numbers. I don't believe in giving numbers and statistics to you. I mean, if somebody is really keen on getting them, they're available online. But let me tell you something from a very personal perspective. Okay, I mean, something that is very close, how I experience the change that's happening in my country and why I think things are getting on the track. Okay, so I'll give a little bit of a personal experience. I think almost 30 years ago, I went to the United States on a scholarship. So 30 years ago. And when I went, it was on a professional program I went. So it isn't a typical student program where you would go to a university. Here, I had to interact with a lot of people, people practicing professionals, and I had to give even public speeches. So at that time, when I had to connect, right? I was actually representing India and I had to connect to the American audiences. I used to say something very interesting. I was barely 24, but I would use things like the 3M formula. If you're a management student, you understand this 3M. Okay, when a country is performing, you look at the money, the men, and the material. So the men, money, and material are the 3 M's that are very important from any country's perspective, especially a capitalist country like United States of America. But I was coming from India, and I wanted to tell them that my country is also a great country. So in my speech, I say, we have all the 3 M's. And those 3 M's are men, men, and men. So we have the human resources. We are a human resource rich country. So I would portray to them that I represent a country that has enormous amount of population, and that is our asset. And 30 years ago, I was speaking like that. So when I got into my profession, I started watching different governments, play around with the so-called human capital of the country. The only asset class, we had was this human asset class. And I noticed that there has been enormous amount of negligence. None of the governments in the last maybe 65, 70 years, nothing has been done to this asset class. So give a couple of examples. I'll give you 2 examples. Look at it from the health perspective. Okay, take health. India, I don't know how many of you, I look at health very closely. Health is very close to my heart, and I know that human capital assets are very important. If you don't take care of the health, then you're not going to really get anything out of them. So India has something called triple disease burden. India had attention, and I'm telling you, it really appalled me when I sat as a young professional analyzing what this country is going through. So we have something called triple disease burden. First thing is, if you look at typically a transitioning economy, like take a country, and we believe the country is moving towards becoming a developing nation, then the country moves away from what we call as the infectious disease profile to a non-communicable disease profile, which means your typhoid, your malarias, and your diarrheas disappear, and you move towards non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes mellitus, and cancer. So that is what India is supposed to go through, transition from one type of economy to a developing economy. But what happened in India? We retained, strangely, we were developing, we were growing economically, but we retained the infectious disease profile, and we acquired the non-communicable disease profile, which means we had these two, what we call as the dual disease profile. And there was a time just before NDA came into power, there are study reports that said that infectious disease profile, India mimics Bangladesh. Look at it. India is developing, but infectious disease profile, we are mimicking Bangladesh. And from the NCDs, non-communicable diseases like cancer, diabetes, we are mimicking United States of America. It's like we are resonating to two different countries with dual disease profile. It's a burden. Disease is a burden. Then strangely, another thing happened. Now, this is very important from development perspective. India started urbanizing enormously. It started growing and urbanizing. And suddenly the city started seeing a whole lot of motorization, as we call. And the more number of more number of private vehicles started getting into the cities, there have been a whole bunch of accidents. So today it's a triple disease burden. What we call is a triple disease burden, where you have infectious diseases, where you have non-communicable diseases, and accidents are creating morbidity and mortality. If you open today's papers, I was appalled, Ritika, to find that in Vizag city alone, there have been 8,000 deaths in the last year and 25,000 morbidities from accidents. So India has this. Now you go back and check in the last 65, 70 years, there has been neglect. And I would say it's a criminal neglect of healthcare system in India. But when you ask me what is it that is palpably different in my government today, you notice
that's what I'm coming to now. What is different?
Right. So what we notice now is Ayushman Bharat. When that was introduced by the Prime Minister, it is completely a game changer. Today you find lakhs of people. At one time I used to go to Bombay. I used to find long queues outside Tata Memorial and all these government hospitals. And they were all people coming from Northeast to be treated for cancer. Recently, just before COVID, I was in Mumbai and I found the numbers to be very less. And when I checked with people, they said, ma'am, that's because they're getting treatment in many other hospitals around the country. So when the Prime Minister introduced this is simply a game changer. Lakhs of people are getting treated. So the human assets that we have are being protected now. And look at the investment. Even at one time, our healthcare investments used to be something like 1.3% of GDP, but now it is 2.5% of GDP, which is marked improvement in investments. And I remember earlier, many years ago, they used to invite me for debates on budget, your budget expectations. I was so young, and every budget expectation, I would say that this time there has to be enhanced investments in healthcare. And my wish got fulfilled only when NDA came into power and Prime Minister started investing. And you would notice in COVID, see what happened in COVID during COVID times? We started deploying technology. We started giving healthcare and medical, help, like pharmaceutical help, to almost 150 countries. So not only India, we are impacting, other countries. So that's one thing. Another important thing I noticed is in, again, human resources, education. All these years, there was again a criminal neglect of skilling in India. We had huge numbers. Every time everybody was talking about India's demographic dividend. But Ritika, let me tell you, we haven't seen demographic dividend. When does a dividend come? When something performs well, right? So we haven't seen a dividend. What we have right now is a demographic promise. It's a demographic promise. So you're young and we expect that you're going to work, you're going to earn money, and you're going to pay taxes. India is going to gain from that. But we now, after Prime Minister Modi came, he gave one whole thrust to skilling, which was completely ignored and neglected. And just for the record, I want to say that India missed the entire third industrial revolution. We missed the entire third industrial revolution. Why do you think we are, Taiwan is a smartphone maker. Why do you think we need to, get gadgets from all parts of the world, from China? Because we missed it. Nobody cared. Nobody skilled us. So nobody looked at Make in India. So these are the two things that completely come to my mind. We've done a whole bunch of things here.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I wanted to come to also, because obviously the Prime Minister is talking about Atmanirbhar, and for the first time we're going to have Diwali, which is going to be not a Diwali with Chinese goods. We are going to have our own very Atmanirbhar,
Yeah,
and
our own things. Yeah.
Our own things. And you're talking about, what about other countries who are making phones? Taiwan's making phone, China's making phone. Only now Micromax has now started coming in and started coming with those marketing strategies, and now we are going to make our
Yeah.
own very Indian phones. What is the reality, just in a nutshell? Do you think what is the reality and the very practical aspect of the Atmanirbhar? How possible is it? Are we well equipped for it? Are we ready for it?
Before we really look at, let's not look at all or none situation. Let's not look at things like, is it white or is it black? We have to be time for transition. Again, we are talking about transitioning into Atmanirbhar. Okay, so since we have not had the opportunity to, skill, invest, India has lost a lot. Even we missed out on the great urbanization wave that swept through the Southeast Asian countries. India has never capitalized on that. Maybe because the government was not ready then. Never thought of urbanization as an advantage. So we lost that. Skilling, people were not skilled. We lost that. So now we just started again with Make in India. Make in India is kind of ridiculed. A lot of people say, "How it is Make in India? How far? Whatever." But we are making great steps. It isn't easy. Let me tell you, it really isn't easy to transition from an economy that is like more bent on knowledge driven. If you look at our GDP, if you look at our GDP profile, maximum GDP comes from services, which is nothing but an intellectual activity. You look at manufacturing, very less. So to transition from something that is purely intellectual to move into something that is dependent on what we make with our hands, like Make in India, create things, productize. Look at the IT industry. I was quite extensively IT industry. We were so happy with services, Ritika. We were happy with services. We never believed in patents. We never believed in owning the IP. We never believed in owning the product. We were so happy with services because it was giving us revenue. But today, do you are thinking on those lines? We are not thinking. We want to get products. We want to walk on, get products in. So a lot of thinking has changed. So I'm very, very, very optimistic about Atmanirbhar Bharat. This is going to take a bit of a time, but we need to show that kind of patience, that kind of commitment towards it, and we'll be a success. See, just to give a couple of examples.
Karunaji, before you move on, can you move your camera a little towards the center? I can only see.
I'm not able to understand where it's going. So
you move it, and that's right in the center.
Is this it?
That's fine.
I think I need to move back a little. Is that
please go ahead? Yeah, this is fine.
So what was I saying? So just another thing on Atmanirbhar Bharat. India, we have been deluded into believing that foreign goods are very good. Huge market strategy they deployed earlier, isn't it? So they would say that you need to have your breakfast with cereals. They have to be fortified with iron. Excuse me. So breakfast is completely a great Western invention. If you look at an Indian pattern, we used to have 2 meals. Every Indian. Go back to your, maybe check with your grandparents. We used to have 2 meals. And
absolutely. My parents telling me having lesser meals, having 2 meals a day, 2 full meals.
Why? Today it's such a strange thing. India, we always practiced 2-meal thing. And so without our knowledge, we were practicing something called intermittent fasting, right?
And
intermittent fasting today is being sold as a solution for, weight loss, health, etc. But my grandparents, as far as I remember, were just on 2 meals with a huge, a 16-8 window. What they call a 16-8 window is a common practice for us. Look at our indigenous foods. Millets. Millets was considered to be what? It's a poor man's food. What a shame. And today now everybody is chasing millets. Now they hard sold what is called as quinoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, why do we have to? I was given a 10 kg pack of quinoa when I went to the United States. Okay, I didn't know what it was. I thought it was heavy stuff, and I just dumped it there. But yeah, exactly. Now look at it. So we do have these indigenous millets, and I was told in Northeast there's someone who kind of stored 27,000 indigenous seeds. And imagine, so they are not tampered. There's no GMO process happening there, so we can get back, the fortified stuff. So Atmanirbhar is actually like in the backyard. It's in the backyard. You just like in Sri Lanka when they used to dig the backyards, they used to find those jewels, right? And everybody thought Sri Lanka was a poor country, but they're right there. So it was a serendipitous discovery. The same thing is going to happen to India. It's going to be a serendipity. We're going to discover our own earlier whatever we lost. So it's possible.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, great points there. Karuna ji, now coming a little bit to your area of expertise. You often talk about innovation. You often talk about technology. Where do you think India stands on innovation and technology today? Or there's still a long way to go?
Again, I'd like to say the technology, forget about technology, but the invention and the innovation part has taken birth only when Modi ji took over as Prime Minister. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I have 30 years of work experience, and I come with a technology background. And every time I would propose a technological solution that kind of hinged on innovation, the governments would resist because they never understood what is innovation, right? So we started listening to the word innovation only after the Prime Minister came, and he gave it such a huge thrust today. Every school talks about it, every college talks about it, every higher educational institution, IITs, NITs, everybody's talking about it. So it's typically an infant, and it's going to take off very well. As far as technology is concerned, I have seen how India has kind of tried to adopt technologies, but we were blown away. One is either we were blown away by the technology that we went and kind of, it's like you go to a big, well laid out, dinner, and then you just fill the plate with stuff, right? And you don't even know where to start and how to digest it is a different part. So same thing happened in India. It's like we were introduced to e-governance. You went and picked up, you didn't know what was your back end. You didn't know what was your middleware. You didn't know what was your front end. You went into so many difficulties, right? So, but now there is a bit of a sense of what works for this, what works for our country, and where exactly we can deploy technologies very well. I liked what recently our Prime Minister said. He used the word responsible artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So far, I have been extremely alarmed by the way we started looking at AI. In fact, I wrote an article 2 years back on 2 years back on artificial intelligence, and I said that India is like ecstatic about deploying AI, but India should be very cautious because we always believe we are a great test bed for things. Okay, being test bed is good in one way, but if you are not cautious, then it can take us on a real ride. So I was very, very worried about it. In fact, Niti Aayog at one time said we openly declared that we'll become a AI test bed. But now, when Prime Minister openly says that we need to do what is called as a responsible AI, which means we move with caution. We know where to deploy AI sensibly. We know how much to take and how far to take. So I have been also seeing how other countries look at AI deployments, and I think most of the countries are like planning so sensibly. Like initially they also made mistakes. Most of them thought that it's a good idea to deploy in military like USA and China. But I like what UAE is planning to do. UAE wants to deploy artificial intelligence for their human resources. Then I like what Japan is wanting to do. Japan also is looking at bringing in efficiencies. Then I like what France is doing. France also wants to look at artificial intelligence for environment. Now India is trying to look at inclusion, like in agriculture, in education, in healthcare. Typically all those areas that will address the inclusion problem that India has had historically.
Karuna, since you talked about UAE, I remember this very interesting point that you made. I think this was 2 years back in UAE, where you were talking about smart living. And you were clearing the point. You were saying that, smart living is not when everyone has an Alexa, Amazon Alexa in their homes. It's not a robot serving you food. It's for us, the India understanding of smart living is actually giving dignity of life to everybody.
Yes,
can you talk a little?
I'm so happy you paid attention to that. It is true. As I said, it's very easy to be blown away by what technology can do. So, in fact, when I was speaking, there were 7,000 people in the audience. There were ministers from other countries, there were diplomats, there was everyone. And I had to make my point very, very clearly. So I categorically said that artificial intelligence or any kind of high-end technology has to be applied very sensibly, because it is not just a double-edged sword. It's much more than that. We in the world, we think that we know what is a double-edged sword, but I gave the dimension that it can actually delude you into believing things are good. There are times you actually I spoke about a concept called mind fog. You look at something, you're enamored so much, it kind of clouds your mind, and you think it's good for you, whereas it ends up being bad for you. So that's the reason why a country like India should deploy enough number of people working on these technologies to see how they can be applied to real life problems. This has to be done very sensibly. It just cannot be done just like that.
Kanuji, we're also talking about a responsible way of living, and that's what the Prime Minister always talks about. So I have to ask you that, do you think that the Indian development model is actually, the Bharatiya development model is actually slightly different from the Western development model? Because we particularly don't believe in exploiting our resources, our land, our people. And even when the Prime Minister talks about climate change, we know what the solutions for those really are.
Absolutely. So India ways an absolutely unique way. There was a time that we got caught up, maybe again blown away by where the world is going, and started pledging, what others pledge. But a time has come to really dig our own backyards, check our own resources, our ways of working. India is a country that gave Agnihotra farming to the world. So it's a very unique way of farming, where you actually perform Agnihotra in a farm to cleanse the farming area, and other countries are following it, and India has given it up totally, right? And there are so many things, like right from our medical practices, India can just go back into our ancient knowledge and picking up from there. So our development model can be modeled after how our previous generations lived. For instance, recently there was one program by RSS, and they said you urged everyone to look at at least a tree in the house, and do prayers, offer prayers to the tree. And when they did that, a seemingly simple job, right? It looked like a seemingly simple thing, right? There are many people who called me and said, ma'am, for the first time we saw that this big tree in my house started drying up at the roots. So they started seeing things that they never saw. Imagine if the neglect continued for another year, then they would have lost the tree, and the tree would have kind of died, or maybe along with the roots lifted the house. So there's so many practices, right? From using the haldi on the feet to, these are practices that are transformative, and somehow we lost track of them. So India's development model has to be shaped after our cultural and traditional practices.
Yes, yes. And since you're talking about transformative, I have to ask you again, what are the particular schemes and what are the policies which have been very transformative according to you, which have actually helped in unifying India much more? And also, I'm asking this because we're seeing for the first time that people from the Northeast are also playing a very, very important role in contributing to the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. So will you give me a second? I'm not able to see myself clearly. Can I just change my position?
Sure.
Is it okay?
It's much better now.
Can you see me now?
I can see you.
Okay, because I'm not able to see myself. Okay, is that okay?
It's fine. It's perfect.
Okay. So so what was I saying? Transformative policies have been plenty in the country. As I mentioned, I'm completely enamored by what happened in the healthcare sector. I am blown away by the new education policy because, there's a fantastic emphasis on training and skilling and, the universities, let's say, preserving and strengthening the universities. That's absolutely right. The other one is about infrastructure.
Yeah.
Providing infrastructure. When you talk about Northeast, I remember my brother is a senior bureaucrat working in Northeast, and there have been times when a bunch of people from there would come and they would never believe they were a part of India. That was a problem. But today, after 6 years of our government, there has been integration like none other. First of all, integration through connectivity. You give infrastructure, you connect those, our Prime Minister calls them Ashtalakshmis. What a beautiful way of saying that, Ashtalakshmis, and integrating them into the country by giving infrastructure, by providing jobs, and by also culturally recognizing that they are unique yet a part of us. These are absolutely transformative. It's not only Northeast, dear. Look at what's happening in Kashmir. I remember, Ritika, I was 29 years old when I taught a bunch of 29 vice chancellors and deans in agricultural university. I was that young. And there were deans who came from Kashmir, right? And I remember how they spoke about Kashmir and how hurt they were about, Kashmir is like better than even Switzerland. I would tell people, don't go take a holiday there. Destination wedding can be here. No, but these are the same people you see now. They feel the sense of belonging. They now have completely started looking at life differently. It will take a while to integrate totally, but we are integrating not only Northeast, we're integrating the North, which is so important for the country.
Okay, talking about let's move on to the young innovators of today. Of course, again, the Prime Minister has laid emphasis on the startup culture. Do you think that a little more needs to be done in terms of the innovation? More innovators come up, more ideas come up, and therefore we use those innovations and use those ideas in sort of tackling our daily problems as well. I'm talking about even till now, we are seeing in the bigger cities of Hyderabad and Bangalore and Pune and Mumbai every year, we're seeing floods every time. Can we use these innovations to actually help us mitigate the losses of these natural calamities? Natural calamities you can't ignore, but use our innovations to at least mitigate the losses.
Absolutely. So, first of all, let me say that, what the Prime Minister has done is, again, be it Startup India. I used to work quite intensely with the startups much before this government came into power. And I see a world of difference between how the entrepreneurs or the young CEOs used to feel then and how they feel now. They feel there's a sense of more integration into the system. They know that they can take their product and kind of sell it either to the government or a PSU. There is a way to really start their efforts bearing fruit. I see the transition. For instance, a unicorn was a rarity. We never saw anything, but recently we saw more number of unicorns in the country, and a whole bunch of people. I remember everybody asking me, ma'am, where do I apply for a job? Where do I get a job? But now most people are thinking of becoming entrepreneurs. So, so the very thought that, you want to do something on your own and become a job creator has been planted by our Prime Minister. I can safely, very categorically say that. He has given the confidence that, people can actually start becoming entrepreneurs and job creators. And he's not only just given the inspiration, but he's creating an ecosystem for them, be it, attracting funding, etc. Also, for instance, look at impact investments. Impact investments are very specific investments brought into a country to change the social, setup. Like, it could be healthcare, it could be farming, it could be education. So it's only after a prime minister that whenever I go to any other country for a bit of work, all the impact investors are chasing after me, because first I heard that India can be a good place for such investments. And they go to the entrepreneurs and young startups.
Yes,
and a lot has been done. Much more can be done, and we are doing well.
You're talking about impact investors, so then I have to ask you then, do you think that there are any particular regions of the country which could be the major growth drivers right now? I mean, we're seeing UP is now talking about, Yogi ji is talking about even a film city possibly coming in Uttar Pradesh.
I have tried to see how India is developing, but I think from my government's perspective, Prime Minister is very clear. He wants equitable development. Okay, he wants equity everywhere. Whenever you see that, he's talking about bringing in equity. So that's the reason why South, Northeast was integrated, because there has to be equity. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't capitalize on certain regional uniqueness. So each region, like, be it West, be it South, there's a certain kind of, let's say, unique resources, be it talent, be it natural resources. So, for instance, the city that you are living in has the biggest startup ecosystem.
Yes,
So the same thing holds true in Hyderabad. Like, it is it's a hub for pharmaceutical companies, right? So we've had a innate, resources, inner resources or whatever available, and we are trying to capitalize on that. So my guess is the Prime Minister also is looking at a very equitable development, but capitalizing on uniqueness of each place.
Okay, so capitalizing on the uniqueness of our place. So I have to ask you, because you were talking about, you travel abroad, a lot of people ask you about India. There's just a little bit of a thing that I'd like to add here. We went to Japan last year and we saw that everywhere you have to rely on cash. And whereas in India now, we are so heavy on digital economy that when I step out of the house now, I don't have to carry my wallet. I don't have to carry any cash, no going to the ATMs. You just have your phone with you. You have your Beam app with you, and you're pretty much done. So is there something that the world can also learn from us in terms of digital economy?
Absolutely. India, actually, we have been trendsetters in many areas, I mean, the kind of Aadhaar, the very boldness of the act, like giving a unique identity to 1.3 billion people is like a dream for many countries. It's a dream for many countries. So we set a precedent there itself. Then we moved on to digital economy, and which again is a fairly bold move, but because the Prime Minister is so interested in bringing in transparency and, let's say, he's more keen on transparency, integrity, honesty. So obviously you would like to eliminate those, the cash transactions, and that's why demonetization has happened, right? So what I liked was he went into demonetization and immediately created these digital assets so that we could move on to a digital economy. So which is actually quite a trendsetter for the world.
Okay, Karuna ji, my very last question to you for today. We've already spoken for 40 minutes. What do you think that you wish there are certain things that India should do and can do? And also, what is the future of India now from here on?
Yeah. Okay. So, there has been something that's on my mind for a very long time, and I think India has to do that now. Again, it's to do with human resources. I've always felt that even you would know it, right? There are many, many educated women idling away. Now, you check the background, they would have been toppers, like they would have got a gold medal in maybe quantum physics or whatever, but they're just sitting at home and they're maybe making rotis. I'm not saying that's bad, but they're capable of much more. There are many retired seniors sitting at home and they're still able-bodied. They are retired, yet they are resourceful. Now, people who have to be brought on board because India is human resource intensive. We are educated. They need to be brought on board in such a way that we will provide, workers to the entire world. It's happening now, but it has to happen in a very formal way. We are living in a gig economy today. Okay. Now there are so many private firms that say offering tuition from home. So many. People with PhDs are teaching children 10th graders. I'm not against it, but I think that she is an underutilized asset. We need to come out with something very formal, very by the government in such a way that these assets are put to good use and we supply our workforce to the entire world in a very dignified way. And we earn bucks from all around the world. That's my dream for the country. But the second thing you asked me about is the future of India.
Yeah.
Right? So India wants to be basically a Vishwaguru, right? We want to be in hope of light for the world because traditionally we have been knowledge driven. We come with the richest culture. And what I see in the future is that we will play a very powerful role geopolitically. And I think the game changer or the critical mass we have attained now with COVID. Entire world is looking at our resilience, the kind of coping that we have demonstrated in spite of being extremely big. So future is also kind of linked to what I see as the Asian century. So historically, we knew that the 21st century is a century of Asia. But at that time, it was dominated by China. But India, now China is taking a dip and India is now going to really rise up very phenomenally. And interestingly, I'll say something. Our Prime Minister has to be lauded for something very important. We are a huge country. We are an extremely huge country, 1.3 billion people, extremely complex, layered development, etc. Now, notwithstanding that, we've been extremely agile when it came to tackling either COVID, coming out with gadgets, test kits. We've been so quick, and it also says very clearly that when we set our target for becoming a 5 trillion economy, Prime Minister is very beautifully navigating a big mammoth. Let's say, India's mammoth, you compare it with the wildest of animals. It's a very huge country. But the growth is quickly going to be in the area of 8% very soon. It's projected by 2030, which means we will move into the TIPS category, like, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and Singapore, which are very tiny countries. They're growing at 8%, but we are a huge country, and we are also going to grow at 8%. So, India has a bit of uniqueness, and it takes a very strong visionary leader to navigate this. So I think we are on the path. We will play a very strong geopolitical role in the coming few years. And I think Vishwaguru is a non-negotiable for all of us.
All right. So on that note, I would end today's interview. Those are very, very strong and inspirational words coming from Karuna Gopalji, that Vishwaguru is something we cannot ignore, and that will probably happen by 2022 or 2030, you said?
2030.
2030. All right. Thank you so much, Karuna Gopalji, for talking to us today and taking our time and answering all the pertinent questions on Bharat Voice. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.